Guys, don't tell anybody. Super Mario Bros. 2 that came out in the US, it's not the real Super Mario Bros. 2. Welcome to Same Name Different Game, and welcome to the first episode of the Nintendo Entertainment Celebration. Yes, a 6-episode series celebrating the 30th anniversary of the US launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's going to be 6 episodes of nothing but NES and Famicom games. So let's get started with a little history about the Famicom, the NES, Super Mario Bros. 2. In 1983, the North American video game market crashed. Consoles were considered a fad that was now over, and arcades were having trouble to boot. But in Japan, things were hunky-dory, and Nintendo released their first home console, the Family Computer, more commonly known as the Famicom. The transition from Famicom to NES is a long but really fascinating story. Sadly, it's a story better suited to a different kind of show than this one. But here's the nutshell version. Nintendo knew that video games were perceived as passé, over, done, finito, not to mention retail poison. But with the help of a robot, a light gun, and a clever name and system design, the Nintendo Entertainment System found its way to North America. Atari was given a shot at distributing, but foolishly turned it down, as they would also do with Sega's Genesis in 1989. After securing distribution on their own, in large part due to the persistence and gumption of first Nintendo of America president Minoru Arakawa, Nintendo went forward with a test launch of the NES in New York City on October 18, 1985. The system launched with 17 games. Packed in with the system were Gyromite and Duck Hunt to go with Rob and the Zapper. Available at launch were Stack Up, Hogan's Alley, Wild Gunman, Excite Bike, Wrecking Crew, Golf, Tennis, Baseball, Soccer, 10-Yard Fight, Pinball, Ice Climber, Clue Clue Land, Kung Fu, and Super Mario Bros. The release date for Super Mario Bros. Is not 100% for sure pinned down accurate. The truth is we don't know the date on that, but it was around there, so I'm going to say it's good enough for jazz. There's a really interesting article by Frank Cifaldi over on Gamasutra from a few years ago that details trying to figure out when that date actually occurred. But that's not important. At any rate, by the end of 1986, the NES was a must-own for the kids in America. Meanwhile, in Japan, the system was entering its third year as 1986 rolled around, and Nintendo released the Famicom Disk System, a floppy disk-based add-on for the Famicom, in February of that year. A disc release of Super Mario Bros. Was among the launch titles, and in June of 1986, Super Mario Bros. 2 hit the disk system. It went on to be the best-selling game for the Famicom Disk System, and it is our first game for this episode. As you may know, this game is quite different from what we in the US eventually did get. It's a lot more like the original Super Mario Bros. It contained 13 new worlds to master, and speaking of mastery, I hope if you plan on playing this game that you have mastered the first Super Mario Bros. The game was developed by Nintendo R&D 4, now known as Nintendo EAD, the team led by Shigeru Miyamoto, responsible for many of Nintendo's major titles. Miyamoto himself was busy with The Legend of Zelda at the time, so the lead fell to Takahashi Tezuka. He felt the Japanese players had conquered the original SMB and wanted to up the challenge. The cover for the game even claims that it's for super players. And they're not kidding. This game is brutal, and not in that fun way like Ninja Gaiden or Contra is, where you always feel like it's your fault if you mess up. If you're just a little bit better, you'll be able to progress. Super Mario Bros. 2 relies on rote memorization and tricking the player. It's like the Lucy Van Pelt of 8-bit platformers. This is evident in the first moments of the game. After choosing to play as Mario or Luigi, you start the game. Mario plays exactly as he did in the first game, but Luigi is faster, jumps higher, and is harder to control, setting that precedent for the character. Anyway, you walk forward, find a question block, and hit it. Hey, a mushroom. Hey, screw you! The mushroom looks enough like a good mushroom that you most likely are going to grab it. Even if you've seen a real super mushroom by this point, it looks close enough that it's difficult to distinguish. You're either going to die or take a hit, and this sets the tone for the entire rest of the game. How about bonus areas that send you back to earlier parts of the stage? How about when those areas force you to suicide if you aren't big? Oh, and remember warp zones? Those are back, but some of them send you backwards. If you don't want to go backwards, you can kill yourself. How about gusts of invisible wind that blow you into pits? This game was made by people having a laugh at your expense. The challenge doesn't feel organic like the later stages of Super Mario Bros. No, this game's challenge feels like it's all based on tricking you. Remember earlier when I said there were 13 new worlds to explore? Well, that's true, but if you use a warp zone, you can't see World 9. And in order to see the final 4 worlds, A, B, C, and D, you have to beat the game 8 times. 8 times. I think I can live without ever playing those levels. In summation, I don't think this is a very fun game, and unless you're a die-hard Mario fan who has sucked the marrow from the bones of every other main series Mario game, I'd leave it alone. At the time of Super Mario 2's release in Japan, the NES had just gotten full distribution in North America. People were still eating up the original Super Mario. Plus, it was a Famicom Disk System game, and there were no plans to bring the FDS over to the United States, although later Famicom Disk System games did get releases in the form of NES cartridges. Adding to that, according to John Irwin's book on Super Mario Bros. 2, Nintendo's resident game master Howard Phillips had recommended to his bosses that Nintendo not release Super Mario 2 in the US due to its incredible difficulty curve. But soon enough, fans of the NES were legion, and they clamored for a sequel to Mario. Enter Fuji TV's Dream Factory. Fuji TV had a big summer-long programming event coming up called Dream Factory, and asked Nintendo to make a tie-in game. He's back. The game started life as a prototype done by Kensuke Tanabe. It was a vertically scrolling game in which 2 players stacked items and threw each other to climb to higher levels. He showed it to Miyamoto, and Miyamoto liked it, but they just couldn't get it to be fun, so they shelved it. When Fuji TV came calling, they dusted off that old prototype, and Nintendo R&D 4 turned it into a full-fledged platformer with horizontal and vertical scrolling segments. The resulting game was another Famicom Disk System game called Yume Kojo, Doki Doki Panic, roughly translated as Dream Factory, Heart-Pounding Panic. It featured 4 Fuji TV characters exploring a world created by Nintendo, populated with enemies created by Nintendo. Miyamoto was heavily involved in making the game, much more than Super Mario Bros. 2 as he'd finished Zelda some time before. The game was a hit, and it was really fun. Nintendo wanted to do a US release. In a 2011 interview with Wired's Chris Kohler, Tanabe said, "We knew these Fuji TV characters wouldn't be popular in America, but what would be attractive in America would be the Mario characters." And thus, the decision was made to repurpose the game as Super Mario Bros. 2 for the North American market. And this is our second game for this episode. Now, we're not comparing Super Mario 2 with Doki Doki Panic, but a quick rundown of changes would include some color palette swaps, as well as a couple of item sprites. And of course, the playable characters being changed to Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach. The biggest change is that in Doki Doki Panic, you have to beat the game with all 4 of the characters in order to see the ending. Whereas in the US version, you only have to do it with 1, which I think is a pretty fantastic change. Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in October of 1988 in the US, and it was an immediate hit. It famously graced the cover of the inaugural issue of Nintendo Power. The gameplay mechanics were, of course, much different from Mario 1, as you now picked up enemies and threw them at each other instead of just jumping on their heads. You could also throw objects like vegetables and mushrooms at the bad guys. You could open doors to other worlds to collect coins and super mushrooms to increase your health bar. It was a huge shift from the first game in the series. Most fans at the time didn't blink at the major shift in style. That wasn't uncommon at the time, and The Legend of Zelda saw a similar shift from the first to second game on the NES as well. The Japanese version of SMB2 established that Luigi was faster, jumped higher, and was more difficult to control than his brother. The American version of SMB2 ran with that, and also, with the help of different character sprites, established that he was taller and maybe just a bit skinnier than Mario. Also, he's the best character, and we all know this. Super Mario Bros. 2 was so popular in the US that Nintendo released it as a Famicom cart called Super Mario USA. It sold very well there too, probably due to a combination of it not requiring the Famicom disk system and, well, being a Mario game. And with that, several of the game's enemies became Mario mainstays. Most notably, Mario 2 marks the debut of Bob-ombs and Shy Guys. So while the gameplay style is a departure from what has now become the standard hop and bop of a Mario game, the game is a lot of fun, it holds up really well, and it's worthy of the Super Mario name. I don't think many of us wish we had gotten the Japanese Super Mario 2 back in the day. Many of us, myself included, didn't even know that the game we got wasn't the real Super Mario 2. That being said, it wasn't too big of a secret. In fact, in the very first issue of EGM, the 1989 Video Game Buyer's Guide, they mention in their Super Mario 2 review that the Japanese version is a fantastic game that unfortunately may never see the light of day on this side of the Atlantic. Which, you know, aside from not knowing which ocean is between the US and Japan, is wrong in so many other ways. But it did come out on this side of the Atlantic. And this side of the Pacific. Whatever, it came out in North America. On this. Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo was released in August of 1993, and it contains remakes of the 4 NES Mario games. US audiences got their first taste of the Japanese Super Mario 2, given here the moniker of The Lost Levels. In all 4 games, you're allowed game saves and can pick up from the same level if you continue, instead of going back to the first level of the world you died in. So it's a little easier in that respect. All of the games get a major visual overhaul, with Super Mario Bros. And Lost Levels seeing the biggest improvement, but the US version of SMB2 also looks great. In December of 2010, this was released on the Wii, but it's really just the Super Nintendo game dumped right onto a disc. And they didn't even have the courtesy to make it the later release that included Super Mario World on the same cart. So unless the art book, the soundtrack, and the very attractive case really do it for you, I would say you're probably best off taking a pass on this one. Alright, let's do some comparing of graphics and sound. We'll start with the NES games. As you can see, the Famicom Disk System Mario 2 is only a marginal upgrade over the original Mario's graphics, whereas the NES Mario 2 is a considerable bump up in visual quality. But now, just for funsies, let's take a look at these games next to their Super Mario All-Stars counterparts. Now that is a bump up in visual fidelity. I should mention at this point that the Japanese version of Super Mario 2 is also available to US players via Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. However, the reduced Game Boy screen resolution makes the game even harder than it already was, and to boot, it cuts out Worlds 9, A, B, C, and D, so I would probably forget about that one. So that makes it time to give the edge, and I don't want to shock you, but it's definitely the US version of Super Mario 2 that wins the day here. Although, I will tell you, my personal recommendation is Super Mario All-Stars. It's a great value for the money. This cart still isn't that expensive if you have a SNES, and it gives you the chance to check out Lost Levels without any additional investment if that's a thing you're into. Also, both versions of Super Mario Bros. 2 are available on the Wii U and 3DS Virtual Consoles for $5 a pop if you want to check them out that way. And that's all I've got for you this month. Thank you so much for watching. Come back next month, we'll have another tale of Trans-Pacific transformation as we look at a later era action game on the NES and the Famicom. See you then.
He's back, he's here, he's Mario. No, he's the new and improved Mario in Super Mario All-Stars. So much Mario, it's a Mario smorgasbord. It's all the wigged out Mario Brothers adventures you ever played and then some. But this is juiced up 16-bit only on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Mario. So it's bigger Mario, better Mario, in your face Mario. It's Raccoon Mario, Mario throwing fireballs, Mario hurling turnips, Mario negotiating an arms deal. Okay, maybe not. It's Mario like you've never seen him. What's 2 + 2 Mario? What's the capital of Ohio? Mario. You're gonna live, breathe, eat, sleep Mario in Super Mario All-Stars. 4 complete Mario games, including the never-seen Lost Levels. You can't get more Mario than this, which is why the best played